Hi, I just want to, on behalf of NRUE, North Reading United for Education, and Stand for Children, welcome all of you for coming today, braving the cold weather. We appreciate everyone's dedication and support. We know that quality education is one of the most important points or topics as parents, as residents, and we all are here to share in that goal of ensuring that our children receive the best education possible. Today, we're going to talk about 4 major points that have been outlined in Governor Patrick's recommended 2012 state budget and their direct impact on our children's education. But before we start, I noticed we had some reserved seating. There are a lot of local leaders here that I would like for them, to, if they could, to stand up and just quickly introduce themselves to the audience. That would be greatly appreciated. Starting with you, Bob, if you could.
Bob Masseri, Board of Selectmen. Good morning, everyone. Greg Valuconis, the Town Administrator.
Good morning, Jeff Ewell, Selectman.
Mel Webster, School Committee.
Shelley Delaney, Board of Selectmen. I think I'll have a nomination paper going around too.
Please sign.
Carl Nelson, School Department.
Good morning, John O'Shea, Principal of the New School.
Good morning, Glenn McKay, Principal of the School.
Cliff Bowers, School Committee. I have nomination papers as well.
Okay, everyone have a copy of today's agenda? I just wanted to have everyone take a quick look and basically walk through what we plan on doing. As I mentioned, we have 4 topics that are very prevalent to quality education. We're going to touch upon that today. We're going to have Representative Jones speak on it from his perspective or at the state level, and then we're going to open it up to questions and answers after. What we are going to try to do is keep it to 20 minutes per topic. If we have things that haven't been addressed or answered, hopefully we can, at the end of this meeting, go back and possibly reopen that discussion. But in order to get through the meeting in a reasonable time frame, I would like to just keep everything to 20 minutes, and then if we do have time at the end, time permitting, we'll circle back. All right, so I just want to say a few things about Brad Jones. You probably all know that he's been a serving member of the House of Representatives for the past 17 years and has never missed a roll call vote during that time. In 2002, Brad was elected House Republic Leader, and Representative Jones, among other things, is committed to championing tax relief, accountability to government, fiscal restraint, and smarter spending. He is an advocate for improved educational opportunities for Massachusetts children and more local aid to cities and towns. Brad is a strong supporter of education funding and ensuring quality education for our children. He's also a North Reading native who has strong ties to his community. Brad has served on several local committees, including the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. His experience gives him a keen sense or understanding of local needs and concerns, which serves him well as state representative. Brad lives here, as I said, in North Reading with his wife Linda and 2 young children, both of which are now attend the North Reading school system. So not only is Brad a dedicated public servant, but he's also a dedicated parent and a strong advocate for quality education. And I am actually running early, so I am giving you 22 minutes.
Well, after that nice introduction, it's all downhill from here.
I think we'll start.
I don't have any nomination papers today, which is nice. And I won't try to take that much time. I think that the issues the town faces are, on a smaller scale, the same issues the state faces. We probably, in my opinion, and I've been saying it for 2 or 3 years now, that this year was going to be the most daunting that we faced on the state level, and I think it's going to ring true, in part because we have relied so heavily at the state level on one-timers, money from the federal government, our savings account, our stabilization fund, our rainy day fund, and those avenues to balance our budget are running dry. Are either, in the case of the rainy day fund, less money there to play with than there was at one time, and from the federal government, I think unlikely that we're going to continue to get billions of dollars of money every year. So we're running into this situation where we have a large structural deficit We don't have that largesse from the federal government to balance it. The good news, or small good news, is that revenues, at least thus far in this fiscal year, have surpassed original expectations, and through the end of January, have in January surpassed the revised upward expectations. So we had, let's say, a revenue amount. We were passing that. We raised, the DOR and the administration raised the amount. The bad news is we're going to probably spend through all that money pretty quickly because of some of our health costs, snow and ice on the state level, and a variety of other issues. What's particularly frustrating is that you may pick up the Boston Globe or the Herald or whatever the newspaper may be that you read and say, oh, revenues are up. But state funding and programs are being cut. And that's because, you know, and I try to always draw the analogy to the family budget, and it's as if you and your family were surviving on your savings account to pay your monthly bills, and all of a sudden your savings account is gone. So even though maybe all of a sudden you know, after going 2 or 3 years without any pay increase at work, maybe you've had pay cuts, but maybe you finally get to a point where you had a small pay increase at work and your revenue's up a little bit, but because you were relying so heavily on your savings account, even though your paycheck is a little bit bigger, it still doesn't meet your monthly expenses. And that's exactly the dynamic the state's in. So revenues are going to be up. There's an expectation of some level of growth in revenues next year that are plugged into the budget, and there's still a gaping hole. I think the governor, in terms of the local aid numbers, is sort of in the aggregate, what he put out, I think was fairly well received by MMA and people that were at the meeting. Bob and Greg and Jeff, I don't know if, and Sean, I don't know if you guys were at the meeting, but I think the numbers were pretty well received, I think, compared to what people had sort of braced for. And they were well received by me. The problem I have is that there are certain other assumptions that the governor has in his budget that raised questions whether those numbers are going to be sustainable. So, for instance, in the area of Medicaid and healthcare, he's plugged in $1 billion in savings, and he says we're going to do, you know, these things, and everybody's kind of like, well, we don't think you're going to get there. And if you could find $1 billion in savings, I think my sort of tongue-in-cheek quote was, well, what's been keeping you? Because I am a believer that I think part of the reason this year is going to be so daunting is because I think there are some things that we should have done in previous years that we haven't done. I think there were some reform opportunities and things on the state level that would have put us in a better position. It doesn't mean this year would be, you know, no problem this year, but I think it would have been easier to manage. So that being said, whether the governor's numbers are sustainable is a real question. You know, it's very, very frustrating. I like to think that a lot of the members I serve with have served in the local level. I'm not as confident that all the members who have served at the local level remember their service at the local level as well as some other members do. You know, for example, just a couple weeks ago, we were doing our house rules, and one of the things we offer is, let's try to do a local aid resolution. Let's put it in our rule that we'll get a local aid resolution out to try to give some greater clarity to cities and towns planning their budgets across the Commonwealth. Members don't want to do that. That was, quite frankly, rejected pretty much on a party line vote. You know, and I would rather give you good, solid numbers early on, and if ultimately they go up, look, there's never really a problem when the numbers go up. You know, if you planned on getting $1 million and all of a sudden, you know, I call Greg up and say, guess what, $1 million was $1.5 million. I don't usually say, oh no, we already planned on $1 million, so keep the other 500,000. I've never gotten that response. And there's always things that need to be done. And this winter, obviously, it's sort of just adding to the aggravation because we were going to have a daunting fiscal challenge anyways. Now we have snow and ice, you know, plowing and this and that. And then underneath that, if you can get to your pavement, it's accelerated deterioration. You know, the potholes are just incredible. I mean, my advice would be don't take the carpool lane on 93 into Boston because you'll probably flip over and be on the other side of the guardrail. So our budget process at the State House, we have a new chair of Ways and Means. Charlie Murphy was moved on to a different spot. His name is Brian Dempsey. He's from Haverhill. He's served since 1991. I know Brian very well. I have a meeting coming up with him. He's a pretty down-to-earth guy. I don't know off the top of my head whether he served in local government in Haverhill at all. You know, but he's from sort of the area, not too far away. So we'll see what his game plan is going to be. My expectation is if passed as prologue, There will be probably in the next couple of weeks, a series of hearings announced on the state budget in various parts of the state. And each one of those hearings may focus on a different aspect of the state budget. There may be one that's focused on local aid and educational funding. And most likely sometime the second week of April, the House version, the House Ways and Means version of the budget will be released. We will then be given about 2 days to read through it and file amendments. And then the week of school vacation is sort of prep for our budget debate. And then we'll start the budget debate historically the last week of April and finish. And then the Senate goes about a month later. And then usually the month of June is sort of reconciliation with a goal towards getting a budget on the governor's desk. You know, hopefully the trend, at least we saw in January with revenue numbers, will continue on. That can only be a positive in terms of the state budget, and to the extent we have those resources to do the things we did, hopefully we can continue to turn away from either having to either make the cuts that are potentially already on the table or certainly additional cuts. I think I read something in the transcript that, you know, maybe there shouldn't be any concerns at this point about any kind of 9C cuts or additional cuts to local aid or this and that. That should be off the table, and we should really be focused on 12. Probably the only item out there that may get some discussion is whether there are any resources, if revenues to continue to come in, to do anything to help alleviate snow and ice at the local level. And you know, it's a bit of a challenge because, you know, how do you go distribute it? Every town budgets snow and ice maybe a little differently. Everybody maybe has a different snow and ice management plan. So it seems to me, in kicking around this idea, is if we have some resources, whether we do it maybe through like the Chapter 90 formula and make a distribution. And if in fact we're able to do that, you know, say to a city or town that this money is for snow and ice, but any amount that isn't spent on snow and ice, since it went through a Chapter 90 formula, it would be in turn need to be put into your road program, because my guess is there's going to be a lot of potholes that need to be filled or resurfacing that needs to be done. So, you know, there may be certain areas. It's as small a state as it is amazing the different weather you can have in one area versus another. And you know, we may be in the brunt of it. There's other areas that may not get much. But that may be the least bureaucratic way of trying to distribute the money. So I don't know if that's something, you know, that's something we just started to kick around. It's all going to rely on whether we continue to get revenue in the rest of this fiscal year that either are at or slightly ahead of what we're planning on. So we can go on to other topics or amplifying that or whatever you'd
Well,
like.
I think you stole a lot of my thunder. You touched upon a lot of things with Chapter 70 and local aid. I know I put on that the budget is a recommendation, because the more I read about it, the more I realize that these numbers can change. It's as you said, these numbers look great, but let's not have a false sense of security, because these numbers could change.
In many instances, and I've served under Republican governors and Democratic governors, and historically governors' budgets become ultimately not much more than a log for the fireplace. You know, it's a blueprint, it's a snapshot in time, and it's very challenging because, and this is true whether regardless of party, but when the governor does his budget, he's relying on maybe estimates for enrollment for October and November and December in certain state programs. And by the time we get the budget, maybe we've gotten a February or a March number. By the time the Senate gets it, they've gotten a March or an April number. And by the time it's reconciled, maybe there's a little more data. So some of our programs obviously are very driven by caseload, and when you get revised numbers, you know, that may change what you have to put in, and most things that rely on state programs right now in terms of caseloads are not surprisingly up, not down, unfortunately. So
I guess touching on that, one of the things I had was to ask what your sense, what the feel is at the state level for as far as support for Chapter 70 and the funding that the level that it's at now at $3.9 billion. What are your colleagues? You know, what are you hearing? I know it's the beginning stages.
I think it really is. I mean, it really is challenging because I have 40 new colleagues, so 25% of the houses are completely new members.